Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to Signal and Noise. My name is Brian Lamar, your co-host today. Joining me, as always, Andrew DeSillis. Hello, sir.
Brian, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing great. It's warm here in the Midwest. Beautiful. I went out earlier. You cannot be unhappy, even though it's early in the week. You can't be unhappy on a day like this, right?
Yeah, smell of fresh cut grass.
Yeah.
My bushes are blooming, and I am so excited for this podcast episode. I've been looking forward to it since we started talking about it. I've got my perplexity hat on today,
Oh man.
ready to go. Ready.
Well, let's get right into it. Joining me today is a friend of mine, Mike Courtney. He's the founder and principal of Aperio Insights. Also, I need to talk about you're very involved in the University of Georgia MMR program. You
Yeah.
volunteer a lot, you give back a lot. So I really appreciate that as we get started, all the stuff that you do to give back to students and the people that are coming behind us that will solve all the problems in our industry, the ones that we created. But
Yes.
hey, Mike, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Happy
Yeah, and
Tuesday, or second Monday, as we call it. Yeah.
that's right. And we're going to talk a little bit about the future of market research. And when I spoke to, I was in one of my like AI. Oh my God, what's going on with AI? I frantically called Mike on a Friday afternoon. He called me back and had a nice analogy of what kind of is going on in the industry right now. And I really love it. So that's what I'm like, well, let's just talk about that. So maybe, and I know you just did this, but maybe
Sure.
let's bring up the analogy and we'll get right into it.
So let me preface the analogy with first saying that a lot of people, when they talk about AI or when we read things about AI in today's world, which right now we're mid-April in 2026, that a lot of the articles are still about what it's going to do to us, and not as much about what we're going to be able to do to the world or for the world with it. So it tends to be more framed in terms of, well, AI is going to do this, or it's going to change your job, or it's going to take your job, or it's going to push you in a corner, it's going to beat you up. It's like all the things it can do to us. But I got to thinking, well, it's pretty powerful, and if we can, learn how to wrestle it and learn how to put a harness on it and ride it like it should be, ride it like a bull, so to speak, and tame it, we can do a lot of things for the world with it. And so that's the preface that leads to what I'm going to call my landman oil analogy. Those of you that might have seen the show Landman about oil exploration and features Billy Bob Thornton, Billy Bob has a scene where he and the lawyer Rebecca driving out to see a windmill, and she says, "Oh, wait, so you use clean energy to power the dirty energy oil wells?" And he's like, "There's nothing clean about it. It's alternative energy. We don't do this because we want to. We don't do this because we like drilling oil. It's because our great ancestors over the past 120 years built a global economy that's based on it. It's in everything. Tires, the car, battery, your lipstick, antihistamines, medical device. It's in just everything. And we're going to run out of it before we find its replacement." And so he does a really great job of explaining how we're built on oil. And that's just what we've got. And it reminded me that, well, how do we get to that point? How do we get to the point where we're built on oil for the past 100 plus years? Because for most of humanity's time, we weren't built on oil. But at some point along the way, somebody says, hey, that stuff that bubbled up out of the ground, in the, what was that show?
Beverly Hillbillies?
Beverly Hillbillies. Yeah, or just sort of bubbled up. Yeah. Somebody figured, hey, if I create a way to drill more than Brian, Andrew, and I could with a couple of shovels, to really drill, dig deeper, we could get this stuff. And then, well, maybe we'll replace, the oil we use in the lamps and not have to kill whales anymore, because that's a real pain in the butt. And well, maybe we'll heat the house with it and not have to chop as much wood. Well, that's handy. They didn't imagine the thousands and thousands and millions of things we'd be able to do with it. But because they had a tool that allowed them to drill down and extract oil and then figure out, now we got it, what else do you do with it? It's sort of like where we are with AI today. AI is a new tool. It's helping us drill deeper into leveraging basically knowledge and intelligence. Our knowledge is intelligence. In fact, the knowledge is and intelligence that's been there all along, just like the oil was there all along. Just our great ancestors 500 years ago didn't know it was there, and they didn't have the tools to get it. Now we have AI, and it's a toolkit, and it's still drilling. We don't know what the extent of it is, and at a certain point, it's going to start fracking too. So who knows? So I think we need to talk about what we're going to be able to do where we take agency and control back and say, what are we going to be able to do basically when we make AI our bitch?
All right, that's a great intro.
Well, and Mike, that's such a wonderful analogy. And I always appreciate when we're able to kind of back out and take a much larger context look at the micro issues that we're discussing. On a podcast a few episodes ago, we had with Lenny Murphy. He said, "Look, this isn't even AI is not even as big as the internet." He's like, "Think about like electricity, the printing press. And we survived that. We'll survive this too. Everyone, take a deep breath." And that historical context is always so interesting to me. Before we dive in, though, I know history is a huge part of what you do, but you're actually by trade a futurist. And I think people are already getting the sense the way you're speaking that you think a little bit differently and you do things a little bit differently. So before we dive in, could you tell us just like what a futurist is and
Sure,
what work you actually do? And
sure.
I can only imagine that 99.99% of the work you're doing in that space today is AI related. But if you could just set that stage for us, then let's dive in about how we, grab this proverbial bull by the horns and make sure that something positive comes out of it.
Yeah. So the term futurist is really a misunderstood term, right? Some people think, oh, I'm a futurist too. I love trends. I'm like, I go a little deeper than trends. But really, being a futurist is very, very similar to being a researcher. We have different methodologies, different approaches. We're trying to better understand things. The big thing that's different is the time horizon. Hindsight, insight, foresight is a trilogy of terms that we like to use. Hindsight, we all know, is looking at the past, and in retrospect saying, gosh, I would wish I didn't, or I shouldn't have, or done something different. Insight is looking at today, looking at now. Foresight is simply looking at the future. The difference between research and foresight is really time horizon. Research tends to try to solve things for the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months. Foresight is trying to look at possibilities. We don't predict stuff. We're not Karnak. I can't tell you who's going to win the next Super Bowl or what the stock market's going to be in 6 months, but I can help think through possibilities to the extent that we can better anticipate and manage change. Because that's all a futurist does. A lot of people think, oh, you're a futurist, you know everything, and therefore you must think you're better than us. I'm like, no, I'm worse. I've made worse decisions than most people by far. And I'll go toe to toe and document any of it with you if you want, if you got a lot of time, longer than a podcast. But as a futurist, what we really try to do is just say what's possible and why. And then we start to get really inventive and crazy and go, well, if that's possible, and they get together and have a baby, what's that possibility? Holy shnikes. Yeah. So it's anticipate and manage change. Look at the possibilities. Don't try to predict one of them because you all know that spoilers can happen. And, if we know what the possibilities are, that gives us an advantage already.
Awesome. So most of what you're doing, I'm sure, is AI right now, because that's where a lot of this unknown is. It's the fastest evolving technology or tool that I think we've ever seen. Whether you're looking at, just huge jumps, like step changes in capability that are happening within a fiscal quarter, as well as like in the financial markets. We've never seen revenue ramp like this. We've never seen investment like this. Everything feels like it's off the rails because it's happening so quickly.
Yeah.
Before you go out into the future possibilities, which is where we want to spend this podcast, and it's going to be so fun. Describe kind of like as a futurist and as in the scope of your work that you've been doing this, kind of like the uniqueness of the AI problem as a futurist, or not the problem, but just the
Yeah.
advent of artificial intelligence, kind of like within your space.
I think one of the things that we have to wrestle with is measurement. Now, in research, we measure stuff all the time. We can measure things quantitatively, qualitatively, get a direction. We measure stuff. So, how do we measure AI? Well, most of us haven't been really good at finding an analog to exponential measurement. If I say, hey, I'm probably, 10% faster than Brian, running on a track. And, or maybe he's 10% faster than me. And maybe Andrew, maybe you're twice as fast as both of us. Okay, great. And if I said, well, this other thing is, Usain Bolt's maybe 5 times faster than any of us. Okay, great. And then, motorcycles 50 times faster than him, something else 100 times faster. At a certain point, you're like, so it's just a lot faster. And we have no way to really comprehend. If I said, hey, this humanoid bot could run 1,000 times faster than either one of you, you're like, okay, I'm not really sure how fast I run. I'm not sure how fast that is. It's just fast. But if I said that it could run 10,000 times or a million or 3 million times faster, you'd just be like, so like really super fast. And we don't have an analog way to say, what does exponential growth rate mean? So when we say, hey, AI went from this to this to that, it's really difficult to comprehend because we don't have anything else we can point to in the physical world we live in that says, yeah, it's just like this. It grew from this to this to that. Does that make any sense?
It does. It does. I'm gonna steal. I'm giving credit to Mike for he actually said this in the pre-recording, but you were likening it to the combustion engine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually, I'll just hand it back over to you if you could use that analogy again.
Sure. So in terms of combustion engines, we've all heard the phrase, running on all cylinders. We have to remember that at first, back in the first day, it was a single cylinder. It wasn't multiple. It was running on all cylinders meant the one cylinder was firing. Yay. And then if you were in the farming community and, farmer Jeb down the road, went and bought a tractor and you thought, he's a show off, he's an asshole, he just bought a piece of what? Ox aren't good enough for him anymore? Horses don't cut it or something? How are you going to feed it? All the things that they probably gave this farmer crap for. And then 10, 20 years later, they're like, okay, we're going to finally get one of those tractors. But now it's got 2 cylinders. Holy shit. And then next thing you know, 6, 8, 12, engines really grew. AI is like going from no cylinder to 1 cylinder to 12 cylinders in like a week. And you're like, what? And now it's just, again, it's exponential in the way that we can't imagine. Because throughout history, even though the farmer down the road might have adopted something before you did, and a couple decades later, he said, "Okay, we'll finally switch over." Now we're not in control of the pace of change. The pace of change is far outstripped what humans are naturally willing to do.
Well,
It would be like
that
if, or sorry, Brian. I was just to say, it would be like when we think about like technological advancement, and I've heard it said that, like obviously technology is advancing more and more quickly. We've seen this, across like the internet and capabilities there, and like iPhones and television and all these kinds of things progressing much more rapidly than it took us to get from the steam engine to the combustion engine. It sounds to me like, these capabilities jumps that we're seeing in AI from ChatGPT in 2020 being a pretty broken chatbot that like couldn't really access the internet to where we are today would be like if a year after Alexander Graham Bell invented the phone, we had an iPhone. It's like that fast. How
Yeah,
is that fair?
yeah. It's that kind of scale. It's just like, wait, what? Wait, you can talk to people remotely? Oh, wait, now I can do it in my hand? Holy moly.
that's kind of my question is this is great from an innovation, an entrepreneurial standpoint. The opportunity that is out there, never in our lifetimes is there someone, you might have mentioned this, Mike, someone today is probably thinking about solving a problem, and a year from now will be a billionaire for having solved that problem, right?
Yeah.
With using sort of artificial intelligence. And in many ways, is our society, is this problematic? So the societal impact to this, and I don't want to get too negative for very long, but like our skill set, our education system, our service economy are not designed to move this quickly. Whereas,
Mhm.
like with petroleum and other large innovations, it took sometimes decades. Like your farmer example, it probably took about that length of time, right? That
Yeah.
somebody had a tractor and somebody else thought, well, 15 years later, finally, I'm going to get a tractor. Now you almost, it feels, at least it feels like my perception is my neighbor's doing this now. Well, 10 minutes later, I got to do it immediately or I'm going to be left behind. And when you're thinking through all the positives and the amazing ability that we have today that we didn't have in the past, what is the societal impact of this?
It's a great question because it is part of sort of, the fear of AI, right? People are like, hey, it's going to do this and this and this to me. And some of those things are true. Will it cut certain jobs? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It just will. But just like at the early days of oil exploration, people didn't know, wait, someday, my ancestors or my offspring's kids are going to do what? they're going to have a job doing what? That doesn't exist yet. Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
we've all heard the phrase, the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but here's the bad news. You got to get in the tunnel first. And you're probably going to be in the part where it's pitch black and you can't see a damn thing. But only then can you start to look for the light at the end of the tunnel. So first of all, get comfortable with the fact that you're going in a tunnel, probably going to be dark, won't be able to see anything. And then eventually you're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel and you're going to come out and you're going to be like, wow, all the things we've bitched and moaned about for years. God, I wish I didn't have to stay up all night cleaning this damn data before I can even analyze it. Shit.
Yeah.
All the things that we bitched and moan about. Like, I wish someday there'd be something that helps me do this and just click
Yeah.
clip of my fingers and, boom, it would be done. Guess what? We've got it.
Yeah. Right.
Now we've got
But
to
Mike,
figure
yeah,
out how to keep up with it and what to do with it and what it
Yeah.
can't do and what it can do and put the guardrails on it. But a lot of our wishes have come true. Just be aware that the people that we work with or in our community might have wishes that were like, oh crap, they've been wanting to do XYZ for a long time. Now they can. That's a problem.
Yeah.
mhm. But Mike, this doesn't feel like, okay, we're going to invent the internet and it's going to create these white collar jobs. I mean, this feels like, hey, if we put these seeds in the dirt and we can grow our own food, now we don't have to be nomadic anymore. And oh, there's a surplus of food. We can think. Should we invent a system to write stuff down? I mean, this just feels like such a huge step change. So I want to push you beyond like
Yeah.
when we think about AI today, right? Like, Brian and I are like, okay, where can we use this in the research process? How is this going to make our jobs faster? How is this going to, like scale us? But we're still thinking in the way of like how market research and how our careers work today. I want to push you even a step beyond that, which I'm sure is
Yeah.
where most of your strategy work lives.
Uh-huh.
What does this look like 5 years from now when we're not even like, if I had a magic wand and I could spend 10 minutes typing a prompt into Perplexity computer and it would build whatever I wanted to perfectly the first time,
Yeah.
that's like a year from now. 5 years from now, it already knows what the prompt is and it's just doing like what does
Yeah.
that do for us as individuals, for the economy? I mean, is that a fair statement of where it'll be in 5 years? Like paint that future picture for me that only Mike Courtney can paint.
I think you're pretty spot on. The thing that we can't do as much as figure out exact time frames, but we just know at some point these things are going to converge and be able to do X, Y, and Z. My wife and I like to hang out with my wife, and she likes period dramas. So sometimes we watch stuff from like the Victorian age and
Mm.
Bridgerton's, that kind of stuff. And some of these things where, somebody's, a prince or a viscount or whatever, and anytime they want something, they just pretty much just, tea please, and tea shows up, or I want this, it shows up. And imagine living in that life, but with modern stuff, where I'm like, I'm sort of feeling, and all of a sudden it shows up. You're like, wow, that's great. A sandwich and a wow, that's great. So we're gonna live in this world where anything we're like, yeah, I don't like how this works. Yeah, boom, it's changed. Now it doesn't work that way. It works the way you want it. Really? But that was something I bought from somebody else. In fact, they made it. Yeah, but that's okay. This got a layer in there for you to customize, personalize. Just like in the car, you can adjust the radio or the windows any way you want. They're made to be adjusted. I think in the future, software that we do purchase or pay for in some way will also be, here's a layer that can be customized, and it's going to be insanely customized. But you're going to be able to write your own and make your own as well. So yeah, I think the future is going to be really catering to our needs and desires and give us the time to really pay attention to what matters in life. Because what's technology's purpose? It's the scientific application. What's the application of science to meet the needs of humans? That's what tech's purpose is. It's not to do things for its own thing. And people can use it as a weapon. They can use it for good or bad. But at the end of the day, technology is supposed to make our lives better. So now I think we're at the point where it can at scale.
So that's, first of all, that sounds great. And I hope that that's true. But if we are then left to kind of just have our desires fulfilled, everything's fully customizable, the execution of wish fulfillment is automated, and there's drones and robots and all that, as far as manipulating the physical environment and all of these kinds of things, I suppose then humanity is left to the imagination, the execution strategy and implementation is left to the artificial intelligence. What does that do for like value creation as a society? What does that do in a capitalist world?
Yeah.
Um, how do we, rather than only consuming our own automated wish fulfillment,
Hmm.
like a lot of human accomplishment, satisfaction, so on and so forth, comes from labor and creation. In my view, you can debate that.
Yeah.
I'm a trained political philosopher, is what I studied before I came into this market research space. If we get to that point, what are the implications of being in this? It almost sounds. I'm going to call it the magic wand scenario, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question because the thing we have to keep in mind is that unintended consequences are around every corner. Around every corner. There's an article I had found and I've talked about before in some of the talks I give that back in I think 2023, a woman in Georgia, 2 weeks before her wedding, was in a really small accident, very very minor, but it did deploy the airbags. Airbags are good things, right? So airbags in a car, and she happened to be wearing sunglasses to protect her eyes. Sunglasses are good, protect your eyes from UVs. So a good thing and a good thing combined and created a bad thing. The minor accident deployed the airbag. Well, airbags are good, right? But the airbag hit the glasses, shattered one of the lenses, and she became blind in one eye weeks before her wedding. Unintended consequence. You're like, wait, airbags are good. Sunglasses to protect your eyes from UV is good. These are two good things. Well, the unintended consequence when they came in contact with each other was an unfortunate thing. Now, granted, she went out and actually found a sunglasses company with shatterproof lenses. So she turned a tragedy into a business. So she's got the right mindset. So wonderful for her. But I think if we again look back through history, for a lot of our existence as humans, we didn't really have to interact with too many other humans. We had our own little tribe, our own little village, and we were fine. But as soon as we started to travel more and interact with other people, we need more, quote, governance because we could impact others, they could impact us. Sometimes there's wars, etc. Now imagine a world where all the things you asked AI to do for you before breakfast, it did. But by the way, in doing so, it impacted your neighbors or the other people in your community and vice versa. Because what if your neighbor's teenager says, hey, AI, make me something that turns the house into a speaker and play that sound that I can't get out of my brain because I watched it on a video last night and I want to really just blast it. And you're like, holy shit. And you decide to do that how early in the morning? How is he even up?
Hmm.
But again, all these things are going to interact with each other. We're going to need governance because you're going to be able to do something that steps on everybody else's toes and vice versa. So we're going to need governance. We're going to have to figure out how do we put controls on things. But in terms of commerce, yeah, is the traditional software world going to be the same? No, because a lot of the things the software does, you're like, yeah, I'll be able to just say, make this, this, this. There it is, and it sort of made it. It doesn't necessarily account for taste because might make something with software that you're like, looks ugly, but that's what he wanted. Okay, here it is. But yeah, we're going to have to rethink where value is, which means we have to rethink what is scarce. Because throughout history, value has also always been surrounded by what is scarce. Whether it's, oh, there's a gold rush. Why? Because gold was scarce. Nobody says, hey, there's a granite rush. No, we got lots. There's another mountain over there if you want it. So we have to look at what is going to be scarce in the future. And that's what's going to generate money.
So if you take that to the insights industry,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you thought about this in
Oh,
depth,
yeah.
where do we sit in a few years or whatever time frame you think? What's currently scarce that we will be demanded upon and plentiful, and what are your thoughts around that?
I think the expertise to think at the higher levels and higher strategic levels. And, there was something I read or saw a week or two ago that really made sense is that, AI helps lower the floor. It lowers the barriers, the boundaries of doing the basic things.
Hmm.
Sort of like, sometimes we buy a kitchen appliance that helps us cook something that we couldn't cook on our own because we're not smart in the kitchen, but it doesn't make us Gordon Ramsay. So,
Yeah, it's my pickleball analogy. It's easy to be good,
yeah,
really hard to be great, right?
yeah, exactly. And AI, it lowers the floor. It says,
Yeah.
hey, you don't have any skill at doing whatever? Great. I can create a website for you. I can create an app. I can do this, this, this. But to get great, to be excellent, requires expertise and knowing when to say, that's not right. I want it this way, that way. And then also, again, add in subtle things like style or preference for a certain aesthetic or a certain approach, and not just take what it says, as gospel.
So it then becomes that, if I'm following you, because the implementation and the hard skills of doing something. So, for example, like I can write a pretty good survey.
Mhm.
I can program one in like Qualtrics, but I couldn't probably program one in Decipher because there's some coding language in there, and I'm very rudimentary there. I can now, rag 100 market research textbooks. It will write the code. It'll do all this. A year from now, it'll even be better at doing all those things. It almost means that like the tasks that we're performing in our professional lives to have value, we have to like elevate them to an art form almost, so that there is that differentiation between what the program can do and then what we can do with it. I know
Yeah.
you mentioned like taste, right, is part of it. And so it's almost like that vision and that imagination. And then, there are some screeners that we've read that are okay. There are some that are horrible, and there are some that are just chef's kiss, like they're perfect. Is that what you think is going to happen? Is that we'll actually see like further specialization in just this really like elevation of what we're doing to an art form? Is
Yeah.
is saying art form the right way to think about it? Yeah.
I think is as good a word as any, right? Because at the end of the day, there's people that have probably been or could have been just fantastic, just kick-ass market researchers. And unfortunately, they were born, let's say, 300 years ago, and nobody really needed research at that point where they lived in their village. But they could have been great, but they didn't have access to the tools to actually do that. And in this world, I'm sure in today's day, there's probably people that fantastic market research mind, but they don't have the time maybe to stop their current job and go to UGA's MOR program and learn how to do research and get in the research industry. But in the future, maybe the AI tool is going to let them say, hey, I've got the part you don't know, you guide me, and you can still get to that level of excellence or, that high level of art in a sense, even though you didn't necessarily have the same training that we might have had. So AI is going to, again, help elevate us, do the grunt work and do the things that either take us a lot of time or we're not good at, and that we can really do well beyond that. But it's no different to when we say art. Think about painting. It used to be, a long time ago. We've got art history major down the street that we're friends with, and she explained that back in the day when you see art that was like a little teeny painting, you're like, why they were that small? I'm like, I don't know, maybe they just didn't have a lot of canvas. Or it's like, no, because they had to make their own paint. They had to make their own brushes. They had to make all of it. And the paint only lasted a few minutes and then it'd dry up and they'd have to go harvest more berries or whatever and make more paint. And then one day somebody came along and said, hey, I'm going to make paint in a factory. You can buy it in a jar. And you're like, oh, that's like, wait, what? That's blasphemy. You can be a true artist if you're
Mm.
buying your paint from a jar. Could you be a true researcher if you had AI actually create your screener for you? Oh my God, that's horrible, right? No. So maybe we can still say, well, maybe the thing that made him a great artist wasn't that they could really mix their own paint. That's cool. That's a nice skill. But maybe the part of somebody saying, well, I had the idea for the research, but it helped me write the screener and figure out the better way of wording some of the questions, even helped me do the analytics. But I had the idea for what question I wanted to explore. And that created value in the world. So the person who has the right idea for the right questions to ask and then can say, hey, take this angle, guide the analysis in a certain way, can still be the Michelangelo of the research world, despite the fact that some of those things weren't things that they did by hand. That's okay.
I just want to take a break and say I love all of these examples that you give. It really puts in context the historical analogies and examples that you give really puts a lot in context about where we're headed and some of the fears that I know that I'm experiencing and probably a lot of people are experiencing. So first off, that's awesome. Keep doing that. I need to learn some myself.
Mhm. Well, and I'm sure as well, in your work, Mike, coming up with these analogies so that you can break down these incredibly complex, really like paradigm shifting. I don't think mind bending is too strong of a word because, like, I used, like I said before, I studied philosophy, and my favorite thing to do was just like sit around and read Kant and be, like have like feel my brain hurt. And I feel like that when I'm talking about AI pushed out further than like a 6 month horizon.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm sure this is like a skill that you have, and I thank you, Brian, for stopping us and just pointing that out. I'm going to go crazy off into the future because I think it's fun.
Bring it.
Okay, so well, my actual question is going to be more short term, but I'm going to frame it way into the future. So AI can solve all of these problems. We're mining things on the moon using electric rail systems to ship them back basically free. We're mining
Mhm.
asteroids. There's enough food in the entire world for everyone now. We've solved world hunger and homelessness and all these things because we have all these resources and we are free with AI to use our imaginations and creativity to create value as strategic art, literal art, music, all these things. And humanity is just so happy. That's 15, 20
Mhm.
years from now. What happens in the next 3 years, though, when, like Brian was saying, someone's going to create $1 billion company
Yeah.
and have maybe them and one other person work there? What happens to all the people who, I feel like I'm so far behind, and I'm probably actually in like the 95th, maybe higher percentile. When I look at like the whole spectrum of people who like don't use AI, use it like a search engine, and then I'm over here, like that's a great end state. And I hope you're right. But what happens in years like 3 to 10 from now if year 20 is utopia?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things I think we have to look forward to is that the tools are going to come down to our level. They're going to meet us. Like
Hmm.
you were saying a little while ago about, hey, could I program in this tool when I only know this tool? Well, what if AI makes a layer that says, hey, you program it the way you would normally do, and I'll give you the interface that you're familiar with, and on the back end, we'll convert it to what it needed. Oh, interesting. And imagine what that would do for our daily life. What if you got somebody older in your family that says, "Hey, I'm used to, finding the channel on the TV with this and pushing this button." It's like, "Okay, Dad, well, Grandpa, we'll make the remote control work the way you want it to work, not the
Okay.
way that we keep telling you every friggin' week. Don't push that button. It's this one. No, no, no. Okay, if you want to push that button, great. We'll make the remote control do what you want, just magically, and it'll know. Oh yeah, when Dad pushes that button, he never means that. He always means this other thing he just forgets, okay. So just do it. It'll meet you where you are. So to make it easier. But we get an advantage when we don't make it a one-way conversation, right? Don't just wait for it to say, well, I keep waiting for it to knock on the door and say, hey, we're ready now. You want to explore and we're going to meet you where you are. Open the door at least, go out on the porch and wave it in, at least meet it part way and you'll have an advantage. And if you actually got into the street and say, hey, I'll ride around with you for a while and we'll get to know each other, you'll have an advantage. If you get to be friends with it, hang out at the bar every once in a while, or really get to like know how it thinks, know what it's good at, know what it really sucks at, what makes it a mean drunk, those kind of like really be friends. I think now we've got a huge advantage. And we have heard, I was up at a conference in New York couple months ago, Investor Week for Bitcoin folks, Anthony Pompliano, that crowd. And they were talking about how the AI people that they know, the Sam Altmans of the world, had a pool going as to when, in what year, as in either this year or next year, perhaps, a solopreneur, a company of one, would have $1 billion valuation, be a unicorn valuation, not necessarily $1 billion in top line revenue, certainly not an EBITDA, but still valuation, a unicorn $1 billion valuation for a solopreneur. And they think it's going to be either the end of this year or sometime next year. What if they're wrong? What if it's not till 2030? And it's 2030 that Brian and Andrew, maybe is a duo instead of a solopreneur, we have $1 billion valuation. Okay, fine. I think we can wait 4 years, but I think that'll be cool nonetheless.
So there is a gap there though when we
Yeah.
think about using AI to create value. So just for if you can
Yeah.
indulge, walk you through an example from literally today. So I'm getting married in 5 weeks, and we need to do our seating chart. So I opened up Perplexity Computer and I started chatting with it. I gave it my guest list. I gave it a PDF of the venue. I told it the functionality that I wanted, and in about 40 minutes this morning, while I was having my coffee before I started reading my work email, I coded an application that we can drop and drag people. We can put their dietary restrictions in. We can do all this stuff themed with our wedding colors. It's amazing, right? And the only difference between my fiance and I is that I took like a 10-hour AI certification and I nerd out about it and spend my time playing around with it. And I know how to prompt and iterate.
Hmm.
But we will soon be at a place where she can just press a button on her phone and say, "Hey, I'm trying to plan my wedding and I need a way
Yeah.
to do the seating chart as a web app," and it will intuit all of the things that I did this morning that took me 40 minutes
Right.
in 40 seconds. And I guess the question is like along that ramp,
Yeah.
what happens economically? Because in my brain, I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I should just set this up online where if people send me their guest list and a PDF of that, I'll make them a wedding chart app. And is that worth anything? I don't know. Could I even do that? What harnesses would I have to put around? It just boggles the mind. But I get anxiety around this when I think about like marketing research and I think about how long do companies like ours and individuals like ours have to create these tools of immense value before, like you said, the floor becomes so low that anyone can just ask it to do something, and now that's not unique. Your best polymarket guess on when we get there and what the implications are.
So again, I think lowering the floor doesn't raise the ceiling. So lowering the floor doesn't mean that somebody can automatically then do everything all the way up to the top. It just means the floor is lowered. So yeah, a year from now, your wife might be able to, or somebody might be able to just say, "Hey, seating chart, figure it out," and it does. Okay, great. But somebody that does have more training is going to have access to control of and use of so many more resources to do things at a level that would just boggle your mind. So I still think it's useful to again know AI, take courses in AI. And when you were saying, that you spent 10 hours, I was at UGA a couple weeks ago for a guest lecture, and one of the students, Danny, said that he had spent 400 hours studying for the GMAT. And I'm like, you spent 400 hours and you're worried about AI? I mean, take 10% of that and learn and apply that towards AI, and you'd be a ninja. I mean,
Yeah.
in fact, I would say right now, what every researcher, just knowledge work company in the US or in the globe should do is everybody's got some amount of vacation, right? Hey, you get a couple weeks vacation, maybe 3 or 4, because you've been around for a while, whatever. Everybody should get an extra week of AI-cation, right?
Mhm.
Where you get an extra week of paid time off, you got to use it to study AI. And if they did that and literally did that, like they actually spent time learning more about AI, doesn't have to be 40 hours in the same week, it can be whatever. But if they truly did that, if everybody in your company or in your client companies spent 40 hours, a whole work week basically of time learning about AI without the pressure of all the other things they're trying to get done in their job, think about what impact that would have. I mean, that would just be amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So are we going to see a big barbell effect then, where those who are early adopters and who do this kind of education,
yeah.
and then, like you said, it doesn't sound like you think anyone's going to be left behind per se, because, like you said, there's this lowering of the floor. The tools will become easier and easier to use. They'll become cheaper to use as we have more compute, all these kinds of things. So no one will necessarily be left behind, which is a lot of the like AI fear. But is there going to be this big barbell effect between those who are just kind of base users and then those who were riding the wave the whole time, learning how to swim and surf and windsurf with this? Uh,
Yeah.
do you think that that will be the case? And are there implications to that, like economically within marketing research?
So I actually do think that some people will be left behind. When we lower the floor, we mean that anybody could do it. Anybody could do it. And that means that task not the job necessarily, but the task has less value. I mean, keep in
Hmm.
mind that, most of our parents grew up in an age when, there was somebody that got paid to operate the elevator.
Hmm.
And then people were like, wait, we're not going to have an elevator operator? How are we going to do that? We're going to push a button. We're going to push the button? I mean, yeah, we're going to push the button.
Right.
We, lower the floor, so to speak, in terms of, yeah, push the button. Great.
There you go.
Now,
On the floor.
yay. And so did that mean that elevator operator lost their job? Yeah, it did. And because there was no longer a lot of value, there's not scarcity in terms of, well, who could possibly operate an elevator? Anybody with a finger, maybe an elbow. So some people will lose their jobs. Some people will be left behind. But I think that there's going to be a lot of other new things that they can go to if they understand and have a basic AI fluency. If not, they're going to be left competing like the farmer that's still got the ox and the plow, going, wait, the other guys, they got an autonomous tractor now. Jesus Christ. They're going to be like, I'm still using a donkey and a shovel, and that guy's got not only a tractor, he's got an autonomous tractor, and they've got an autonomous robot baling machine. And oh my God. And they're just orchestrating it all because they can think at that higher level. They can organize this stuff. And now instead of your 40 acres against his 400, now he's got 4,000 acres. Well, he's got 40,000 acres now. Jesus, please. I mean, you're just going to feel farther and farther behind, which is to say, get on the bus now. There's no better time to get on than now. If you're thinking about, well, I know a little bit, but I probably should know more. I've been thinking about doing more. This is your sign. Pay attention. The world's not going to wait forever. Get on, or else it's gonna be choppy waters. Not saying you won't eventually find something. You're a good guy. People like you. You got a LinkedIn profile. Wonderful. But still, it's going to take a while if you don't understand how to use the tools of the day.
I have just a couple more questions. One is non-AI related.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about the future of the industry, everybody focuses on AI, on every industry, right? Is there some
Yeah.
other factors that are happening in the universe that's something that maybe we should be thinking about beyond AI that could impact us?
I think for part of it, Brian, it is about looking at critical intersections. Because
Okay.
even when we look at AI and say, okay, well, what can AI do over here? Okay, yeah, I can do that, but it can't do this. What would make that possible?
Yeah.
And we just have to look for those areas to intersect and create new opportunities, right? Even the idea of like we're doing work on robo taxis, right? Future robo taxis use case. Okay, well, can it drive, me to the airport and back? Sure, it can do the same things as Lyft and Uber. It's a robo taxi. Well, then can it do other delivery things like deliver a pizza? Unless the car is going to come up onto your porch, no. But maybe if we take robots plus, autonomous cars, oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, the robot. And do I have to tip a robot? I'm not really sure. I know the robot's probably not going to like, grab any of my fries or dig into the DoorDash thing and, have a little snack. So look at other technology and see how they might cross.
Yeah. Interesting. My only other question is, are futurists allowed to gather?
Yes.
Because, like, I just imagine a bunch of futurists in a room brainstorming, and I can't even imagine what would come out of that room. Is it everything or is it nothing at the same time? Like, it seems kind of a crazy little. I'd like to be involved
Everything
in
in that.
that.
So in fact, actually, this past weekend you used the word gather. It was the spring gathering for University of Houston's foresight program. So every year they have a spring gathering, which is a gathering of futurists. I was going to go, something happened the last minute. We had to go adopt a cat. Long story, so yeah, University of Houston has a spring gathering where we gather futurists. Dubai Future Foundation or Dubai Future Forum has an annual event, which I don't know what's going to happen this year, given what's going on in Dubai and Iran. But where when I attended, 2 years ago, 2,500 of the world's top futurists. Amazing. Just the conversation is amazing because
Yeah.
as futurists, we refuse to be limited by today's limitations because we're like, okay, is it possible that this could be different in the future? And what would it take to get there? And is it possible that that would also create something bad we've got a countermeasure against? Yes. Because just like the oil analogy of, hey, we developed a way to drill, then figured out all these other things we could make it. Was it all sunshine and roses? No. Oil has created all sorts of issues, right? It can be, it's pollution. We've got, all sorts of issues with oil. It's created all sorts of things that, impacted our health, wellness, all sorts of good plus bad. AI is going to be the same, good plus bad. But when
Yeah.
futurists get together, we try to think of both the utopian and the dystopian. So I'm also a member and the chapter hub lead, or one of the chapter hub leads for the North Texas APF. There's actually an APF, which is Association of Professional Futurists, APF. So there's actually an association where we can, you know,
Yeah.
wear tinfoil hats and just
Yeah,
grok
it's a
about.
safe place.
It's a safe place for us. So, but again, it at the end of the day, everybody who watches this podcast can be a futurist just by saying what's possible, not trying to
Yeah.
predict, just saying what are the underlying currents, the driving forces that are making things change, that are causing a change, and what can we do about it? Can we accelerate it? Can we say that might happen, so maybe we should do this to protect ourselves before it does? Okay.
Yeah. One other question I have, I should have asked this a long time ago.
Mhm.
Are Do clients call you with these kind of questions, like a little bit more specific to their company or their brand, and they
Yeah.
say, "What do I need to be thinking about 3 years from now, given what's going on today?" Is that an example of why someone would call you?
Oh, yeah. And in
Yeah,
fact, COVID was for futurists what a hailstorm is to roofers. I mean, roofers don't say, God, I really wish we get a hailstorm, but when you do get a hailstorm, you call the roofer. So COVID came along and people were like, is that a black swan? Is if it's called black swan? Yeah, that's a black swan. Are there others? What other things could be a black swan? What other things could disrupt us to the way COVID disrupted us? Tell me, talk to me, because this really kicked our butt. We got to figure out where do these swans live? Can we just corral them all and just lock them up or keep them from coming over? What's a black swan? How do we think about the future? So it is increasingly important to think about the future. And the analogy here is that we all drive cars, right? And and yeah, I know we shouldn't text and drive and all the things that we know we shouldn't do. What if your car only went 2 miles an hour? Okay, glance at a text probably is not going. It's not that bad, right? You can react to whatever's coming up the road. You're only going 2 miles an hour. You're fine. Well, that's the life we used to live in. But what if you're going 102 miles an hour? Little different story. Reading half of what Brian texts me might also make whoops, and I'm in the ditch. So we've got to pay attention because life is coming at us much faster than it has before. When it was going really slow back before AI, we could take our eyes off the ball and we're fine. Now we've got to really pay attention. So we've got to think like a futurist. What's possible? What's around the curve? Is the road going to go away? Is it going to turn into a pond? Is it going to be gravel? Is there going to be traffic? I've got to be prepared for all those possibilities. It's not about predicting what's around the corner. It's being ready to handle anything that could be around the corner. And that's something we can all do if we just put our heads together, share with each other. Hey, Brian, what do you think's around the corner? Really? That's a really weird thought. Okay. Andrew, what do you think's around the corner? Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking that one too. Well, we just have to talk about what's possible and then think, how do we take advantage of it, exploit it, make money? And how do we, countermeasure or defend against that possibility? It's just possibilities.
I don't know about you, Andrew, but I feel like we should charge people for this podcast.
Put it behind the paywall.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely love it. This has been probably one of my more favorite episodes we've recorded. One last, just totally for fun question, Mike, and then I think we'll probably wrap up here. I want to know, obviously, this is all AI all the time. Are you a open AI guy, Anthropic guy? Are you pulling down your own local models? What is Mike Courtney doing in his personal AI usage and why?
I definitely pull down and run my own local models. I use right now probably 7 or 8 core ones. And I'm always trying out different ones because you don't know what they can do until you try them. And I encourage people to explore. There's so many out there. Go to Hugging Face, look at the local models, see what's going on. It really is important to be aware of what things can do. They don't wake up and go, wait, it can do what now? And which one is it? Shit. None of us still use AOL, but that's what most of us got started on. So, don't be surprised if you veer away from ChatGPT.
Well, Mike Courtney, founder, principal of Aperio Insights. Thank you so much. This was fascinating. I think this will be a well-received episode. And thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you. I love being on.